Today, we're going to go on a journey, not out into the world though, but deep inside our own minds. We're going to take a really hard look at a pretty critical question. Where do our most deeply held beliefs actually come from? So, let's dive in.
And I want to kick things off with a simple but kind of profound question. Just take a second and really think about this. Are the thoughts you have, the opinions you defend so passionately, are they truly your own? Or is it possible they were kind of planted there without you even realizing it?
Let's make this a little more concrete. Picture this scenario. In some cultures, if a wife finds out her husband has taken a second wife, a very common gut reaction is to demand a divorce. But is that reaction an instinct? Or is it more like a script we've been handed? Was that always the default response throughout history? It's a perfect example of something that feels so deeply personal, but might actually be socially programmed into us.
So, how do our convictions even get shaped in the first place? Let's peel back the layers and investigate some of these invisible forces, the subtle mechanics that mold what we believe to be true.
So how's it done? Well, it turns out there's kind of this playbook for shaping people's thoughts. We're going to break down 3 of the most common methods used to influence your thinking, often completely under your radar. So, the 3 big techniques are comedy, changing terminology, and labeling. Now, each one works in a slightly different way, but they're all aiming for the exact same goal: to slip an idea past your critical defenses.
First up, comedy. The source makes a brilliant analogy here. Think about when you're watching a sci-fi movie. You happily turn off your logic, right? You suspend your disbelief just so you can enjoy the story. Well, comedy works the exact same way. When you're laughing, your critical guard is down. And in that moment, new ideas, maybe ones you'd normally question, can be slipped right in and normalized.
Okay, the second method is all about changing terminology. See, words carry this emotional weight. For instance, the phrase, a romantic rendezvous. It feels heavy, right? Serious. It might even raise some red flags. But if you just relabel it as a date, suddenly it feels light, casual, totally normal. The action is the same, but the new label lets it slide right by without a second thought.
And that brings us perfectly to our third method, labeling. This is when the label isn't just changed, it's actually weaponized and applied to a person to shut them down completely. For example, consider the insult, "You're a farmer."
So what does a label like that actually do? I mean, it's obviously not about agriculture. It's used to frame anyone with traditional or values-based resistance to a new idea as being, unsophisticated, backward, from a lower class. And because we all have this natural desire to be seen as modern and intelligent, the fear of getting hit with that label can pressure us into accepting ideas we might otherwise reject just to avoid the stigma.
Okay, so we've seen the methods, but the real question is, why are we so susceptible to them? Let's dig into the invisible architecture of influence that makes all these techniques so darn effective.
Here is the crucial thing you have to understand. Media doesn't just hold a mirror up to society, it's an active participant. It literally shapes our reality by defining what's normal, popularizing the words we use, and influencing everything from the clothes we wear to our deepest core beliefs.
This leads to a really fascinating question. Why is it that sometimes we need an outside voice to validate an idea that already exists in our own culture? For example, when the American comedian Steve Harvey spoke out against platonic male-female friendships, it sparked this huge debate. But that viewpoint already exists in a lot of traditional cultures. So why did hearing it from him suddenly make the idea seem more legitimate or palatable to some people?
And this whole situation perfectly illustrates the difference between 2 ways of forming beliefs. It's like a great metaphor, home-cooked versus delivery. A home-cooked idea is one you've built yourself. You've done the research, you've questioned it, you know all the ingredients. The foundation is solid. But a delivery idea? That's one you accept ready-made. It's fast, it's easy, but you have no clue what went into it. It might look good on the surface, but it could be pretty harmful in the long run.
Now, I know this can all sound a little daunting, but the goal here isn't to be cynical, it's to be conscious. So how do we fight back? Let's talk about how we can actively start to reclaim our own thoughts and build a truly independent mind.
So what's the action plan? Well, first, be truly mindful of your entertainment. Is it reinforcing your values, or is it subtly chipping away at them? Next, consciously filter who you follow and what shows up in your feed. When you see something being normalized, just pause for a second and ask yourself, wait, do I actually agree with this? And finally, take control. Stop being a passive scroller and become an active seeker of content that genuinely builds you up.
Ultimately, it all comes back to your foundation.
As a poet once put it so beautifully, our intentions are the foundation upon which everything else is built. If your foundation is strong, intentional, and self-aware, the walls of your belief system will stand firm against anything.
And to really drive this point home, just listen to this chillingly accurate quote from George Orwell. "The people will believe what the media tells them they believe." That's a pretty stark reminder of the power we're up against and exactly why being conscious is so critical.
And so, we'll leave you with one final, challenging thought that comes straight from the source material. When we look at the dominant cultural ideas in the world today, we have to ask ourselves, are they dominant because they are inherently right? Or do we simply perceive them as right because they won the battle for dominance? It's definitely something to think about.